friends, I will open the ceremony with prayer. Our Father and our God, we are indebted to those brave men and women who fought in the Battle of Abersboro, both for the North and for the South. Both sides fighting for a cause they believed in, and a number paying the ultimate price. Many of their ancestors today remember them fondly, and the fact that they left their homes to go off and fight for a cause that they believed in. We ask today that you be with those ancestors such that they will constantly remember. Be with the families today that remember those ancestors, that they will constantly remember the price that they paid during the years of 1861 to 1865. And Lord, we ask that you let the Abersboro Battlefield Commission, in their quest to preserve the history of yesterday for tomorrow's citizens, to continue to do that in such a way that will be pleasing in your sight. We ask your blessings on the activities of the day, and we thank you for all of our many blessings, for we ask it in your holy name. Amen. For our ceremony today, we're privileged to have some excellent people here that are very familiar with the Battle of Abersboro and the Civil War. The first speaker we're going to have, and these will all be very brief, they will not be lengthy, but the first speaker we're going to have is Mark Smith, who collaborated with Wade Sokolowski to write the definitive book on the Battle of Abersboro. So at this time we ask that Mark come up and share a few words regarding his knowledge and ability about the Civil War and about the Battle of Abersboro.
Morning. Morning. Thank you very much for being here today. We've got great campaign weather, very similar to the time it was in 1865. Wade and I would specifically like to thank the Abersboro Battlefield Commission for allowing us to speak here today. Wade's at a different event. However, I just drove in from Pittsburgh, got here 15 minutes ago, and it's raining up there too. So, although it's a lot colder, I appreciate the warm weather. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the tactics and strategy, specifically pertaining to Abersboro. Why Abersboro? Around February 11th, the Hardee evacuated Fayetteville. He had met earlier with Johnston, and Johnston knew he was going to eventually have to fight Sherman, but with the number of troops that he had available, he knew he could only fight one wing at a time. Probably at best, his numbers were probably 26K. He was going to pre-position them up near Smithfield, which was central in between Goldsboro, which Johnston believed was the true objective, and also Raleigh. If Sherman decided to turn north and head for Raleigh, then they would be able to intercept him. That's why they chose Smithfield. Now, while at Fayetteville, Johnston wanted Hardee to, according to Hardee's battle report, wanted him to ascertain the direction and the numbers of Sherman's army and which way it was going, because he really wasn't sure yet. But at some point they did talk about conducting a defense to delay one of the wings, which the reason for the selection of Abersboro, due to the river and the Black River, Cape Fear and the Black River, and Hardee chose to set up a defense in depth, which was definitely would have delayed Sherman quite a bit of time due to the fact that he would have to deploy troops and keep deploying them as he inched forward closer and closer to the third line in this location. So with that said, on the 15th, the Union cavalry was in the lead. Sherman's scouts were out in front of that and kept running into Wheeler's cavalry, contesting every creek crossing, etc., as the 20th Corps was the first of the left wing moving out of Fayetteville moving in this direction. So on the 15th, by that time, Hardee had set up his defensive plan, which was placing Tolliver's division on the first two lines, which was Rhett's brigade and Elliott's brigade, and then with McLaws, the more seasoned troops, on the third line. And I don't want to say today that Tolliver's division was green in the sense that the green pertained to field operations. Most of those troops there were heavy artillery, mostly around Charleston. The Union blockade was constantly shelling that area, so they were engaging the Union fleet out there. So they did have combat experience, they just did not have field experience. So on the 15th, we have the initial engagement of Wheeler's cavalry kind of handing off the battle to Rhett's brigade, who was next in line. And they held off the cavalry fairly well. Conditions like this is not really conducive to cavalry operations. As you can see, most of these fields, once they're tilled, it's like quicksand. The Federals tried a couple of cavalry charges, didn't work so well, so they dismounted. And at that point, they decided they were going to wait for Tolliver's brigade, which was the lead element of the 24th, to come up and help them out. And by that time, evening was closing in. Also, there was a little activity going on with the scouts that somehow Captain Northrop and a few of his fellow scouts had snuck through the Confederate lines and were in between the skirmish line and the first line, and they noticed a group of mounted officers. And one of the scouts was going to take a shot at him, but Northrop held him up because he figured, boy, that's going to get us in a lot of trouble, being that they're behind enemy lines. While these soldiers rode off, they were going to try to sneak around, and we're in the middle of the field. It was kind of foggy and hazy like this, and Colonel Rhett and his aide rode up to the scouts, and was which he thought was Wheeler's, and he wound up getting himself captured. And they snuck him back to the Federal lines. Of course, he died that evening with Sherman, and jousted a little bit with Kilpatrick. So on the 16th, morning 16th, Captain Hinckley reinforces the skirmish line because they really wanted to cause the Union troops to deploy very early. That's going to take time. The more time they buy, the better off it's going to be. So the Union easily brushed aside the skirmishers and then saw the first line. Following up, more brigades were flowing on the battlefield. Now, the Union Army is stretched out all the way to Fayetteville, and these brigades are moving on the field almost the entire day on the 16th, to include the 14th Corps coming up when they assault the third line. On the first line, everything was going great. A defense in depth is a beautiful plan, but the hardest part of defense in depth is knowing when to disengage. You cannot become decisively engaged, and that's basically what happened to Rhett's brigade, is they became decisively engaged. The Union scouts had found the weak flank. Slocum had ordered a brigade to go around the side, Pace's brigade, and they were going to do a joint attack on the first line, one flanking, one frontal. And it wound up being very successful. It just goes to show good execution of a surprise flank attack. It works every time. So Rhett's brigade at that point was surprised and fell back and into the second line. The second line is held by Elliott's brigade. Elliott's brigade is a really melting pot of just hundreds of different units, to include Navy guns. And Hardee was concerned about their stability, being that they had not seen any combat. So he decided at one point that he was going to withdraw the second line, bringing up two regiments coming off the left and the 2nd South Carolina coming off the right to act as the rear guard as he withdrew Elliott's brigade and Rhett's brigade back to the third line. So the Union easily pushed through the second line. However, Sherman ordered Kilpatrick to do a flank attack to see if they could drive him off the second line, and Kilpatrick wound up running into the two regiments of McLaws' division, and they wound up routing Kilpatrick's surprise attack on the Elliott's left flank. So that didn't work out either. Pretty much at that point, you don't hear any more from Kilpatrick. The assault on the 3rd line now, the entire 20th Corps is up. The 14th Corps is moving. Band Everett Brigade comes up and is told to try to push around the flank. Which on the 3rd line here, if you get the opportunity, I know it's raining today, but it's a great view. Mother Nature has a little surprise over there for the Union forces in the form of a ravine. And it's really deep. It's really slippery. I sent my boys down in there when we were writing the book to try to get them to climb up. They couldn't get out of there, so I'm sure the Union had just as much problems. However, Hardee noticed that, and just in the nick of time, Wheeler showed up with about 600 cavalrymen after he broke the engagement off on the 15th, came back and asked if he needed any help, and he wound up dismounting and going to the Confederate right flank. So he wound up warding off that flank attack. And at that point, Sherman is now at the Oak Road walking around. He's noticing he's got a lot of wounded and killed. And his objective is to get to Goldsboro as quickly as possible. And with these wounded, you only have so many ambulances on the battlefield, and some of his wagons are going to have to be emptied out to haul his wounded. So now, if he gets in another engagement and more delays, he's run out of supplies, possibly ammunition. So now he's really focused on objective instead of fighting the enemy. And on the evening of the 16th, he pretty much lets everything stay where they are. Meeting with his generals, he decided that if the Confederates were there in the morning, that he would again assault them and hopefully go out and defend the positions. However, Hardee did his job. He delayed them. He actually created a gap between the left and right wing. The right wing was actually moving at a snail's pace because Sherman was sending notes to them, hey, we're engaged here. You're going to have to slow up, and they only moved a mere 2 or 3 miles that day instead of their normal 11 miles. The gap between his wings more than 12 miles. 12 miles is a one-day march. If anything became engaged, he could swing the other wing on that and able to support it. So with that, he really had to slow down the right wing, which again upset him because he's trying to get to Goldsboro to get the supply. That's it in a snapshot.
Our next speaker is Dr. Jay Gillespie. Jay is a member of the Board of Directors for the Abersboro Battlefield Commission. He is a teacher of history, a lover of history, and he has authored 2 books. He is an expert on the Civil War presence, and he is an expert on the 18th North Carolina. So at this time, Dr. Gillespie will come up.
Thank you. Thank everybody for coming out. And today when we were planning this, by far the most difficult thing we were trying to deal with was how could we make the weather exactly the way it was at the time of the battle. And we pulled it off, and so I'm pretty pleased with the way that came out. So embrace the authenticity. Working at the museum, I've been here for the last 10 years or so helping out. I really enjoy doing it. And I'm more of a social and cultural historian than a military one. And I'm always interested in not only what went on in places like Abersboro, but why the people that were here did the things that they did, why they took up arms and were willing to kill or be killed for something that they believed in. To me, that's a very fascinating thing to always try to put yourself in the position of the people who were here at that time. And a lot of times when I'm working in a museum, people will come in, particularly northern visitors, and they'll kind of hang their head down because they assume all Southern stuff like northern. And they say, well, it's just for the Yankees and that kind of stuff. But you won. Why are you upset? But it kind of speaks to the idea that a lot of people don't really have an appreciation for both sides' causes and have a full understanding of it. The Northerners come down, and a lot of Southerners around here, they don't really kind of understand what they were here to do. They are always very often portrayed or thought of as vandals or invaders, and again, Northerners who fought here were very dedicated to a very important idea. They didn't see themselves as vandals, they did not see themselves as marauders or barbarians. They saw themselves as here to maintain the United States of America. And that was a very noble and holy cause for them. They were here to not just save the physical integrity of the country, they were here to fight for a very, very important idea, the idea that Lincoln articulated at Gettysburg, that a democratic republic dedicated to the idea that the people can govern themselves, that a country of the people, by the people, for the people, can in fact survive. We tend to forget that in the 1860s, that proposition was still very much up for debate, whether the people really could govern themselves and govern themselves effectively. And so Northern soldiers took that upon themselves to save only not the country, but to save the idea of a democratic republic. And that was something that was very important. I think it's something that when you come to battlefields to always remember that side of it, and also think too, on the other side, the Confederates, which were more my ancestry, and most people's here, I think too. These were people who were just as fiercely dedicated to their ideal of starting a brand new country, that they thought they had every right to do, that they honestly feared that if they did not do so, that they would be reduced to colonial status, second-class status, that if they didn't create a Southern Confederacy to maintain freedom as they defined it, to maintain specific and unique social Southern institutions and freedoms and issues and concerns, that they would never be able to be truly free as they define that term. And so that was a very, very important cause to them too. And I think it's important when we're here not just remember what they did, but why they were here, why these things were so important to them. And the other part I always think about when I come to battlefields is that for all the romance and nostalgia that is attached to the Civil War, and there's a lot of it there, the stories of valor and the story of heroism, and those are all wonderful things. But and that this was a very important, critical, arguably the single most important event in our history, but also to never forget that it was a pretty intense tragedy too. Over 600,000 Americans were killed, and they were killed by their millions. And that's something I think that very often gets lost in the romance and the tales of valor and heroism, that civil wars are nasty things. Ours were a little bit less nasty in some ways than others, but 600,000 people, that was about 6% of the population. No other single war, not even the massive numbers of World War II, come close to taking as much of our population as that war did. And I think that's something to keep in mind. Ben Franklin said one time, as tension was heating up between England and the colonies, that when passion governs, she never governs wisely. And I think that's one of the great lessons of the Civil War, is to always make sure that we Americans never let our political passions get the better of us, because when they do, bad things can happen. So with that, thank you very much, and enjoy the authenticity, embrace the authenticity, and have a great day. Thank you.
Our final speaker is Sharon Stevens, who is the director of the Dunn Area Tourism Authority, or some people know it as DATA. DATA supports the museum we have here with funds financially, and without their help we could not exist. Sharon has, from the time she took over her job, been very supportive of what we've been trying to do, which is to preserve the history of this battle for our citizens. So at this time I'd like to bring Sharon Stevens up here now to say a few words.
Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Stevens, and I'm the Community Marketing Director for the Dunn Area Tourism Authority. I'm excited to be here today as part of the celebration of the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Amesboro. The Amesboro Township Tourism Development Authority was formed on May 5, 1987 by the General Assembly of North Carolina in Chapter 142, House Bill 429. This is an act to authorize the levy of a room occupancy and tourism development tax in the Amesboro Township in Harnett County. These funds are to be used to develop, promote, and advertise travel and tourism in the Amesboro Township and surrounding area, to sponsor tourist-oriented events and activities, to operate and maintain museums and historic sites, and to purchase, operate, and maintain a convention facility. That is our mission in writing. And as a tourism authority, we do have budgeted in our annual budget fund specific for Averysboro and what goes on out here. My job is to promote attractions that can entice someone to want to come and visit my community. The Averysboro Battlefield Museum makes that part easy. When asked, what do I have in your area, what do I have that they would be wanting to come and see, I tell them, I have history, lots and lots of history. I have a Civil War battlefield and museum unlike any other in the state. There are local artifacts on display from the families of those that fought in this battle or even owned the land. How about we have a cemetery where multiple soldiers are buried in one grave, an original slave cabin still standing on the property once owned by their master. And I have the people, the storyteller, who tell the story as though they have lived it. They can take you back to the place and to the time. You can visualize the soldiers as they line the ridges in the cold rain. You can hear the cannons as they fire round after round, and then you can feel the ground shake as it hits its target. Still standing are the homes that withstood the Civil War raids and takeover. Two of these homes are still on the actual sites of the very property where they were built, and the other one is not far from its original site. 150 years later, we stand here in honor and in memory of those who fought for what they believed was the right way at that time. The Averysboro battlefield, out of the Battle of Averysboro, helped slow down the Union forces to give more time to get troops in place for the Battle of Bentonville. This was a tactical maneuver by the South, and it did its job. The Civil War changed our country, and it changed Averysboro. The Smith family's plantation, the property where we stand today, was ravaged by the Union troops, and a lot of rebuilding had to be done. Families were split. There were husbands, fathers, sons, and brothers who left to fight the battle and never returned. This is the true story, and the story needs to be told. Today, the cannons are silent. The battle-scarred plantation lands are quiet, but the memory remains of those who suffered and died during the Battle of Averysboro. These memories will be shared again and again thanks to the Averysboro Battlefield Commission, a non-profit organization made up of volunteers who do a wonderful job preserving the history and the artifacts from the war and telling this story. That is the story I share with travel writers, and just last weekend I was at the Governor's Conference on Tourism, and I met 5 from up north who are very interested in this story. Hopefully they will come down here and write this story and tell it. Another way we work together is on loan at my office a display that was made for the museum. It displays an actual active battlefield. Also, if you saw an ad in the Our State magazine, my office paid for that. Any events held here, the folks are always inviting me to be a part of it, just like today. We try to keep the North Carolina Welcome Center stocked with brochures as well. Thank you and kudos to the Averysboro Battlefield Commission for including us at Nunn Travel and Tourism as they tell this history. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Mark, and thank you, Jay. And hopefully you know a little bit more now about the Battle of Averysboro and the